Welcome to a new episode of We Are Here Too, a podcast about mental health and life abroad. I'm Francesca, I'm a counsellor, and yes, I'm an Italian living in Scotland at the moment. So I am bringing all my thoughts and experiences and I suppose emotional turmoil sometimes about what it means to live abroad. So, today's episode is indeed about failure. Like, what is if I failed in my life abroad? And this can intersect so many other variables that most likely that feeling of failure wouldn't necessarily be there if we lived in our home country. I don't know, but I hope you can stay tuned and listen along and you're going to tell me what that feels for you. The feeling of failure can come about in many different ways. And over the years, and as I said many times, I've been abroad for around almost like a couple of decades. And I experienced that sense of failure, like cyclically in different moments in my life, in different countries. And for sure, like since I moved to Scotland 11 years ago, that happened quite a few times and for different reasons. At the beginning, I could not really make sense of it, like this sense of like deep unsatisfaction and disappointment for the way things were going. Overall, when we experience this sense of failure, it is realistically like a way to explain to ourselves like, okay, life is not fulfilling in this moment for whatever reasons. I don't think that whatever it is going on for me or the expectations that I had about a specific scenario are not necessarily met in reality. And then I'm living with this like very deep-rooted dissonance that it's not making sense. We could just not make sense of it because, you know, in our head, most likely we're like, hey, I did everything I could. I planned it out. I worked through it. I put a lot of hard work and a lot of resources in terms of time, headspace and finances. And still, I'm not seeing like the fruits of it. And then there is also like this sense of stuckness and helplessness connected to it. Like, why is it that I'm in this space and its place and, you know, nothing seems to go the way that I want it to. I don't feel like at the end of the day my resources or abilities are really matching up with what I'm trying to do, and I'm so unsatisfied and disappointed with everything that is going on. That I don't know what to do, and I am feeling this rooted sense of upheaval of coming back that is not really working for me. When we live abroad, failure feels slightly different, or better, let's put it this way, there are other factors that are coming into place that are contributing to this sense of like deep unsatisfaction and disappointment. And they would then dictate how failure plays about. So, for example, if I have a lack of social network, I feel homesick and I don't have any support around me in whatever form that comes, then I feel like my sense of failure is connected to a lack of emotional support. And maybe in those moments, I'm just like, oh, I really miss Italy. I really miss my friends from back home. I miss my family. And, you know, I can go on forever about it. And maybe in those moments, I feel like, oh, I really wish I could go back home. And maybe I start considering going back to my home country. If the sense of failure is connected to language barrier, culture shock, our inabilities to actually adapt within the new culture, I would say that our sense of failure is really connected to a lack of familiarity in our life. And once again, I may go into like a sense of like homesickness, not really appreciating what's going on in my life, really struggling and having like my tolerance level like incredibly lowered. to everything that is happening around me that doesn't feel, in my case, like Italian enough. Which of course is not going to feel Italian enough. I'm living in Scotland. So of course I'm not going to have it, but that's the way that I'm feeling. If I'm experiencing like financial difficulties or housing difficulties or getting the type of support from statutory services in my country where I'm staying, then my sense of failure is connected to a lack of stability. Can you see that too? Can you see how living abroad can actually impact our sense of failure? It's like this added layer that no one really wants, because I didn't move abroad thinking about that I was going into so many complications and that would then eventually impact my mental health. But it just happens. And, most likely the times that I felt like a failure, I would have not necessarily experienced that way if I lived in my home country. And let me tell you, that's like exactly what happens, because not only things are happening in our life that we feel like it's not really working and, for the reasons that I said, but also we start thinking, oh my God, have I failed at life abroad? Shall I actually, decide and go back home to my home country? Shall I move elsewhere? And that feeling, it's not necessarily there for others. I do think, people who moved away from their, from the city or the town of their upbringing, for sure, that feeling is there as well. I'm not necessarily saying that this is like the experience of only of people who moved to a different country. This could really be the experience of people who just moved to a different town and city, to a different part of the country. But there are again nuances of living abroad, which is like a change of language, a change of culture, a change of system, the type of discriminations that you are subjected from that country. There are so many other layers. But still, it's happening. And on top of everything else, we also might experience this feeling of oh my God, I failed the life abroad. So what do you do about it? For real? This is a genuine question that I'm asking you. And if you have any answer, please just reach out. I would love to share your responses with all the listeners of the podcast, because I would say the way that I go about it is okay, so what is it that it's really happening for me? Because ultimately, all of these feelings, they often stir some deeper wound that I have inside me, which is the sense of oh, who am I, right? Who am I? What is my identity? Am I a foreigner? Will I ever feel like I belong somewhere? Will I ever feel like I am succeeding in what I'm doing? And although there are so many examples in my life that I'm okay and it's fine and I'm overall okay with it, right? Otherwise, I don't think I would leave. I would choose life abroad over and over again. There is always the sense of feeling, which I think I discussed in an episode about a sense of identity, which I think it's episode 3. But yeah, there is always that deep feeling of where is my place in the world? And, whenever something is not going right, it adds to that feeling. And, that means that for me specifically, I need to go through a cycle of okay, how do I feel grounded? How do I go back home to myself? How do I make sense of who I am? Where is my space? Who are my people? And that can come in so many different forms, but that's what happens when we live abroad and we are dealing with so many different variables that sometimes are just so incredibly complicated, and we cannot necessarily control them. Not that I, necessarily promote this feeling of let's go and get it and control our lives. It's not necessarily that, but there is something deep rooted in and the feeling of like, who am I, that really interacts and interplays with like the sense of failure that comes from being abroad and not having a sense of stability and emotional support and familiarity in the new country. And let me tell you, it's totally normal to feel it over and over again and go through this in cycles. And this is where I'm feeling comfortable now. I'm just like, okay, this is happening again. I just let it run, let it go through me and see you to the other side, right? Like, you know, but of course, as I said, if you have like solutions or way to go through this, let's just bring them my way so I can share them. On a second thought, as I was talking about it, I would say that maybe like my advice here would be just think about what you're good at. You know, like what it is again, like, you know, as I said in our past episode on Remember Your Why, focus on it first and foremost. Think about who you are, think about what you want, and think about that maybe like that sense of like failure comes from the fact that you're just a foreigner. You're just someone in a foreign land. And of course, there's going to be like added barriers and added struggles. But that's not what is really defining you. And find a community of people who went through the same process, because they know, they experienced it, they can empathize with you, they can offer advice, they can offer like emotional support. I will repeat this over and over again, like communities are important for our survivals. And that's true whether we are in our home country, whether we are abroad, you know, and especially if you feel like you failed because you decided to go back to your home country, just find people who went through that exact process, okay? Because at the end of the day, you didn't fail. You know, like find within you the reasons that brought you to actually move back. And I'm sure that would be justifiable 1000%. And if I haven't said that enough, I'm a true believer that, you know, whatever things we do, there is always a reason. And there is always like a deep-rooted reasons that maybe it doesn't make sense to others, but it makes sense for us. And we know why we took a certain decisions, why we made a certain choice. And sometimes it's just difficult to stick with it and be proud that actually we made it. Yeah. And so before leaving, I just would like to say that we are, you know, towards the end of the season, and I am going to recruit soon guests to the podcast for season 2. So if you are interested, even though you don't know what we're going to talk about, but you would like to be featured and come to the podcast, just pop an email and we can definitely start chatting. And if you enjoy this and you would like to support me, just please leave a review and comment and just email me. I'd love to hear how the podcast is impacting you. I love a good constructive feedback, or also like flattering words. They're always welcome. So thank you for listening, and see you next week. Bye.